All right. So, wanted to explain to you guys a little bit about this mastering rack. Right here, I have a mix of my new track, Just Blast, which is coming out this week. And if you're watching in the future, it's already out. So, here's a little snippet. So, that's what the mastering rack that I've put up for free download. Just kind of wanted to walk you guys through how it works real quick using this track. So listen to the mix without it just so you can see a difference. So more dynamic. The master just kind of squashes everything together and makes it clean and loud. So how we're doing that is we have the first stage, we have a utility, so we can adjust the gain coming into this effect chain. Right now I have it at 0. I could probably crank it a little bit more, but we'll just leave it there for now. And then the most important stage, I think, of this whole thing is this mid-side EQ. And if you're not familiar with what mid-side means, just think of your music as a combination of a mono signal and a stereo signal, right? So the mono signal is what's coming out of both speakers at the same exact time. So if you were to just test on like a Bluetooth speaker or something that doesn't have two speakers, you'd be playing your song in mono. And the mono here is just everything in your track that is just mono by default. And I know it's a little confusing, but just go in here and play around with it and you should be able to hear it. You can solo by clicking this little headphone thing and see what's going on. But if you click this and play, so you can do that and just play around with it and see what's going on. I think it'll click once you hear it in your headphones. So basically this stage is, if you click over to side, so you click over here on this edit. By the way, the mode is set to mid side. So if you were just to drag this on yourself, you'd have to click that and then click mid side. And then you just toggle between these two. M means mid, S means side, obviously. So when we have side cut off over here, what we're doing is cutting off everything on the sides, like the wideness of your mix above or below 300 hertz. So if we were to drag this around, you can tell it gets a little thinner as you pull it up and then thicker as it goes down, but there's a good balance here. And I always produce into a mid-side EQ that's rolled off at 300 hertz. And then later I'll go in and adjust it if it needs to be adjusted. But this will give you the room to smash everything later with all this compression we got down the chain. So I keep it at 300 hertz, play around with this, but that's just, it's cutting off all the low frequency information that's like different between the speakers. So you shouldn't be having anything crazy stereo going on below that anyway. Your mix is just going to get muddy. And then we have the side brighter knob, which is just going to brighten up around 3.9 kilohertz, so like around 4,000 hertz or whatever. And this is the range where you can give your mix some bite in the sides. And since we're on the side, this is not affecting the mid at all. So if we like play the track, if you're listening to this in headphones, you can tell it's only affecting the sides. It's not really bringing the brightness to the middle of the mix. So it's a really subtle touch, which is good for a mastering chain. And I just put that knob there for you guys so you can adjust as you like. Sometimes you're going to make a track that's pretty aggressively mixed in the high end already coming in here. So maybe you want to turn this all the way down, or maybe you want to crank it up and give it a lot of bite. So I just left it at, I think it was 2.5 in the default. So just mess around with it. And then we have this cut the mud knob, which if you go to the mids, it's just got this band at 250 hertz. So anywhere around this is usually going to be where your mud is. So basically, I just gave you a knob to either cut it out a lot or not at all. but usually a little bit of cut here does a lot of wonders for your mix. So let's just listen real quick, see if we can hear it in what we did here. So it's super subtle, but what that's going to allow you to do is turn up the gain later on. So if we cut down to, like, let's just say -2, just type that in, then play it again. So again, it's super subtle, but cutting the mud there allows you to turn up the gain a little bit more, which will give you a louder mix. Because typically you want your master to be cut right there, so you can have the body, the booty of the mix really up loud, and then the top end really shining through. So typically you're gonna have some cut around there no matter what. So yeah, those are the parameters, and then let's just talk through the rest of this chain real quick. So after this mid-side EQ, we have this compressor, which I call flatten the peaks. Basically, all it's doing is you want to set it so it's just kind of cutting over when you have the really hard hits. So on my kick and snare, you'll see that it's going to activate. And what that's doing is, if you turn this whole mastering chain off, you can hear my mix. I have like pretty intense transients going on. So the drums are really, really loud with like the kick and the snare. And what this will do is it just flattens it out and starts to like mold the mix together a little bit. But you don't want to bring this down too much, because you can see as you pull it down, it just gets crazy smashed, and you don't want that. That's over compression. So make sure when you're putting this on your track and you're running signal into this, that it's just the kicks and the snares, the things that are having like the biggest impact in your mix, should just be slightly going over and activating this effect. So we'll leave that back on here. Even turn up a little bit more before we move on. So yeah, that's flatten the peak stage, and then we have an OTT, which isn't doing a whole ton. We only have this at 23%. I usually even put it at like 15, but 23 seemed to be the sweet spot for this master. And what we got going on here is basically all the bands pulled back, so just a slight bit of molding going on. If I play the track, so it's bringing out all of the frequency ranges just a little bit. I just turned it up to like 100 here, so you can hear the full effect of what it's doing. So if I Control Z and go back to the original, basically it's just adding a little bit of bite to the mix by bringing all of the frequencies, especially the highs, up to the front a little bit after this little bit of glue we had here, this flatten the peaks. So it just adds a little presence. And the next stage, we have a little bit of gentle glue compression, and fairly simple. I have the range limited to around 5 dB, so you're not going to be able to push it really hard. And in fact, you shouldn't be really activating this very much at all. As we play this track, let's see how it's affecting. So again, you should be watching this for it to be only activating on your big like kick and snare hits, or big bass hits, or whatever is really activating through the mix with its transient at any point in time in your track. And if you have a mix that's coming through here and it's like doing something like this, and you can't pull the threshold down too much, then you should probably turn the pre-gain down a little bit. The signal shouldn't be coming in too hot. It should be, you should be using the flatten the peaks for your reference. to make sure that that's not like going crazy over. And then again, using this as your reference. And that's how you know you're going to have a good master coming out of this thing. So yeah, let's just play it one more time. And then you can, with this makeup knob, I left that at 7. It should be a good level, but you can adjust that as you want. Just be careful with it. I didn't include it in the general parameters because you can really fuck things up if you're just like cranking this all over the place. So yeah, and then we got a little saturation going on. I called it clip and color. Basically, that's what it's doing when you put the soft clip knob on. It's acting as a limiter, and since I put it at 15%, you're only hearing 15% of that limited signal, as opposed to 85% of the dry signal coming through. So you're just adding another little bit of grit to the stage. So that's your before and after. So again, really subtle. It's kind of like the OTT stage. It's just kind of allowing the signal to come up a little bit in volume and have a little bit more of that high energy in the high end. I'll turn this, I'll show you what this is really doing, but let me just turn this output down. Let's do 100. So you can tell it's smashing the signal pretty heavily, which is why we have it so low. But having that little bite in your mix will give you some really cool results. So play around with that. I wouldn't turn this drive up much more than that, but you can mess around. Honestly, this is a pretty cool effect to play with and understand. So have at it. And then we have utility here, which I just put in just in case you need to turn it up for a little extra gain at the end. So let's just hear what's going on here. So I might leave it somewhere right there, maybe even just at 1, but you don't want this to be really pumping over very much, just maybe even just a slight limiting. But yeah, you don't want to lose your transients by just throwing things into this limiter. Let's just show you an example real quick. So you can see when I cranked it, it was just like, it's a wall of sound. Your wave file will just be like this huge sausage wave. You don't want that. You want to be able to hear your drums coming through and everything pumping in your mix naturally. So a good practice I sometimes do is turn it all the way up and then turn it down slowly until you hear the sweet spot. So yeah, didn't include this in the general parameter over here because if for someone who doesn't really know what they're doing, if you just start messing with these gain knobs, it's just going to sound like shit. So if you really want to turn it up and get more loudness out of your master, come in here, just open it up and play with this gain knob a little bit, but I wouldn't push it too much. But this mastering rack is basically just meant for producing into, and if you like the sound, obviously just keep it and use that as your final mastering chain. But there's a couple things that I usually add to the end of my mastering chain. One is sausage fattener before the limiter, just a little bit, sort of like doing what this clip and color is doing. I would replace this with the sausage fattener and then play around with it because you can get some really cool color while adding a lot of loudness without going overboard with that too. So and then if you wanted to get fancy, I usually use the Fab Filter L1 or L2 here because you can push into it again and it can deal with a little bit more than the Ableton's limiter can. So those are the only two minor things that I would probably change out for like a final master, but this should do you really solid if you're just messing around and trying to like understand how to get a good mastering chain. So hope this is helpful. I know it's kind of a long video, but hope you enjoyed it, and let me know what you think of this rack and if it's making your life easier or maybe you don't like it. Just give me some feedback, whatever you think. Just shoot me a message at Darkest Dawn, DRKSTDWN, or at Basecamp Pod on Instagram. And yeah, have a good one, guys. Peace.